Okay, so excited to be here with you all today. Hello, I'm Cassie Clark. I recognize a few names here in the attendee list, so super excited. Just wanted to give a quick caveat to say there's going to be some interactivity in this presentation, and I highly encourage you all to participate however you best feel that works for you. I know it seems like we can raise hand and go off mute, but also feel free to put a lot of content into the chat, and I will be monitoring that throughout this as well. So feel free to use that as much as you would like. All right, let's do it. So a little bit about me. I call myself a socio-technical engineer or a behavioral engineer. So really looking at that intersection between people and technology and how we can play with that space that is in there. I've been doing this work for 8 years now. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon in the States. I'm also known as the coffee person. So many people will come to me with requests for good coffee when they're traveling. I am more than happy to give those to you. Feel free to reach out. And then last year in particular, I did quite a bit of soul searching around career in particular. And that has driven a lot of what I'm going to talk about here today. So just wanted to call that out in particular. We'll come back to that. But as for what to talk about today, we'll get into a little bit about career growth in our industry, this little subset of security, as it currently has been, and maybe a little bit even 5 to 10 years ago. And then I really want to focus on how to deepen that career growth and use behavior to do that. We'll talk a tiny bit about behavior science and design as a strategy, but I'm not going to focus too much on that because I really want the focus of this presentation to be career depth and growth for us. And then how to articulate that to leadership, obviously always a challenge for us. I want to make sure we talk about that as well. So I want to start by getting a sense of who's here in the room today. So let's take maybe not even 5 minutes or so to go over just a few questions. So again, feel free to type your answers into the chat for these or raise your hand. So to start, who here would you say works full-time in security awareness, security culture? Love how many people raise their hands on that. Okay, that is very helpful. This presentation will probably be best geared towards you if you work full-time in there, but if you're interested in working full-time, and even if you aren't interested, I think there's still stuff in here that could be relevant for you. All right, how many years? So you can give a ballpark 1 to 5, 1 to 3, 6 to 8, 15. My entire life, I was born working in security awareness. 2, 4, 6. Love the range here. 1.5, 20, 5, 7, 10, 3. Fantastic. Love this. Okay. Really good range. A little bit more subjective here, but how do you want your career to grow? What do you see as your career journey? And are those two questions the same answer? So is the way that you want your career to grow the same as what you foresee as your career journey? I love that market. Okay, great. Yep. Wanting to pivot more towards human risk. Very helpful. Oh, and I love this. More focus on metrics and finding the reason why the awareness team does the things it does. Yep. And I think so much of what we do is why employees do the things they do. So I think there's a really interesting circle effect there. Andre, I love that complete honesty and transparency. I don't know. I didn't either. That's why I went into career self-searching. Staying in human risk without having to move to leadership. John and I have talked about this, but I did not prompt that because all of this is about that. Moving from building a security culture. Ooh, yes, absolutely. Moving into a full human risk management program. And the distinction there. Cyber psychology, Victoria, those are my favorite words. Oh my gosh, I feel lost. Courtney, you're speaking to my soul right now. Still exploring options, want to build an HRM team. Y'all are speaking my language, and I hope this is helpful for you. And so last question, what have you been told about your career growth? Have you ever been told something along the lines of, there isn't a business need to promote you, or I don't know how to promote you? Yeah, well, gosh, I've gotten that a lot. You have to play the game and wait for things to get off your plate. The problem is when things never fully get off of your plate. You have to broaden your skill set. All the above. Yeah, absolutely. I too have heard both of those things. Both, I don't know how to promote you, and there's not a business need to promote you. And the things that you're saying here too. So, a little story time. I'm a person who loves to learn and to achieve. And when I don't have that capability in my role, I get bored and I check out. And once I check out, I don't come back. It's actually, it doesn't even feel like a choice. So in late 2022, after hearing this career ceiling cap yet again, I decided I was done with security and I wanted to explore what else was out there. So I did a year of career coaching. This deep soul searching, whatever you call it, really helped me explore my goals, my values, passions, blockers, things I love to do, things I never want to do again, right? All of these different areas. I investigated dozens of career options, really in depth. And in the end, what I realized is that I don't want to leave security. I just want to remove the ceiling and go deeper with what we do. I want to be more effective. I want to reach more people. I want to change behavior in this really exciting landscape. And when I realized that, I started having conversations with other practitioners. And I found that they feel similarly. So, a lot of what you all are saying in the chat. In fact, most of the people I've talked to over the years see really only a few options for career growth from security awareness. So, becoming the manager of a team. So, John, for example, just said, I really want to grow in this area. I don't necessarily want to manage. Moving to a very large corporation. In other words, you wouldn't necessarily be expanding your skill set. You'd be expanding perhaps your scope of work, transitioning into GRC work, becoming technical, or leaving security altogether, which is what I was considering. I will add that there are some tangentially related fields that we could potentially transition into, such as privacy or responsible AI use. I don't want to discount that. I think that's important. And there's nothing wrong with these career transitions if that's the change you want to make. But I know I found myself wanting to go deeper in my own role as a security awareness practitioner, and none of these offer an option to do that in the same way. I will say that becoming a manager is a very important skill set. Often that person takes on the crucial role of strategizing the entire program, ensuring leadership buy-in. That's essential, right? I'm not discounting that. And in the frame of this particular conversation, not exactly what I would consider deepening into the skills of security awareness. So, to better frame that, I think, and to look at what's possible, I actually want to consider how our technical counterparts are organized. So again, keeping management out of this, we're going to focus on a more IC related role, individual contributor, which again, management, a very viable and important choice. I just don't want to default to the options that are available to us. So this is a very typical career ladder for our technical security and our TPM, our technical program manager counterparts. So you've got your junior level folks. They're generally going to be building a technical expertise. They'll have a little bit low ownership, a smaller scale, or smaller scope, excuse me. Senior folks will have some increased technical expertise, some more ownership, bigger scale or bigger scope. Staff, of course, getting to that deep technical expertise, much higher ownership, a significant scope, and then principal really being the highest level there, creating holistic systems, full ownership, leadership, defining systems and processes, and really influencing how that technical work will translate over multiple organizations. I have occasionally seen similar ladders for awareness, but they tend to focus on very granular shifts. And again, they still cap over time. But what if we could remove that cap? So, for example, if we use the same format instead, what if we frame it in the way that our technical counterparts are often framed? So let's say junior, a bit more operational, they're very, close partners with other teams, but they're executing on work, smaller scope, really great opportunity to get your feet wet in this field and really grow your skills. Senior would be that strategic route, heavy influence, and starting to use behavior science concepts to really drive that success in being effective in this role. And then this new one, what if we also had whatever you want to call it, lead, principal, staff, whatever term you want to use for expertise. Notice here that a key attribute of the highest level is deep socio-technical and behavioral expertise. So this is crucial, and this is how we deepen our skill set and become as effective as possible. Okay, so we're seeing full ownership, significant scope, leading a lot of cross-functional initiatives. So just like our technical counterparts, we need to showcase up-leveled skills and abilities. And for us, these skills should be the things that make us the most effective at our job anyway, right? And the best way for us to achieve this is by truly utilizing behavior science and design to our advantage. Again, this isn't the focus of today's presentation, but I do want to spend just a few minutes highlighting how far we could go and giving a little introduction to this, especially since 40% of attendees who responded to that poll we just had about barriers to human risk management felt that integrating data was actually the hardest part. And that's a crucial part of behavior expertise here. So, what often drives behavior is not actually what most people think. So human behavior is immensely complex. And yet most of our approaches still look at how we adjust our inputs, our training, our engagement, our communications, our phishing. And they might use elements of behavior science to attempt to drive behavior change. Except that usually knowledge is not what drives behavior. So if we're just focusing on knowledge, for example, or training, and going, oh, I guess we should try to put some elements of behavior in there, it's less likely to be effective than if we're using behavior science to create a training, for example. So to best understand sort of how to change behavior, we actually need to look at crucial research that came from Daniel Kahneman. So his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, demonstrated that humans have essentially two ways or two systems that drive the way we think. There's system 1 and system 2. System 1 is automatic, reflexive, habitual, subconscious, and it operates up to 95% of how we think. System 2 is deliberate, methodical, intentional, conscious, and that's as low as 5%. This is really important, right? So if all of our employees are always operating with these automatic patterns they've been using, these neural pathways that have formed over years and years, we need to be able to respond to that. So behavior is rarely deliberately decided upon. Rather, it's driven by our system 1 thinking, and often it's driven by context that triggers this thinking. So what I mean by context is it's referring to sort of the broader external and internal cues that drive our behavior. There are a myriad of them out there. These are some of the most common and relevant to what we do. So time. If you are crunched for time, you're much less likely to make secure decisions, right? Or you may try to take shortcuts. You may try to do whatever it is to make things easier for yourself. You may be distracted, all those types of influences. Social norms, obviously a very big one for our industry. One small one would be the example of social proof. So if you are trying to run an initiative, for example, and you need employee adoption, and you had 70% of those employees already buy-in, already adopted, it would be great for you to say 70% of your team has already done this, et cetera, because that sends them the cue that their community is already doing this, and subconsciously they will want to fit in with that community. But if only, 13% of them had adopted, it would actually work against you to say only 13% of you have done this, because the message you're subconsciously sending is that, oh, my community doesn't value this, and therefore I don't value this. Okay, so the idea of social proof, it's part of social norms. There's also mood and affect, so how we feel about something, how we feel on a given day, even if it's not related to that. Some of those things at play, that plays a lot into security culture and security mindset, how we feel about security. Choice architecture, in particular, this is both how we present information to somebody as well as how we provide options to them. Physical environment, so this plays a big role in terms of everything from internet access to how far away a shredder would be in an office, for example, things like that. And then chronic scarcity is not one that typically feeds into the work that we do, but I do want to highlight because it does play a very interesting role in sort of context in general, which is if you've experienced scarcity over a long period of time, it's chronic, you are unlikely to have the same buy-in or the same needs around the behaviors we may want because they're not your priority, frankly. And so just an interesting one to think about. Any of these factors can play a huge role in determining someone's behavior around security. And these are the things that we need to be considering and designing our initiatives around. So there are a ton of frameworks that sort of work to design for this, including the OODA loop, the CALM model, et cetera. I'm not going to spend too much time here. Again, it's not the point of this presentation, but I do want to quickly highlight that behavior design is a useful way of conducting these efforts. So at a high level, it goes like this. You have a plan, and then you have implementation. In the plan, you would understand the context drivers that are going towards that behavior, think about the barriers to adopting the behaviors that we want, and then hypothesizing some solutions that could work. And then in the implementation phase, you actually want to use that opportunity to disprove some of the solutions that you thought might work and find the one that does work. That's sort of the way that behavior design research works. It's a little bit backwards from how we often think about it. You want to gather information, so surveys, interviews. Oops, so sorry. I went too far. There we go. Surveys, interviews, A/B testing, things like that. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more in depth, but we're going to change the systems that are driving context rather than trying to change an individual person. And then, of course, we always want to measure that success. It's part of that integrating data. I do, however, want to give a quick slide with some very high-level things that we can do immediately to become more effective. So first and foremost, I will shout this from every rooftop. If we make security simpler or we make it default to be secure, people will be more secure. If we expect people to come to us, they're less likely to do it. If we go to them, if we wrap it into a process that's already existing, whatever that looks like, they will automatically be more secure. So part of that is looking at those systematic changes. Again, there are a lot of opportunities, and Jess mentioned this in her great talk earlier today around adaptive human risk, human management. There's lots of opportunity to use systems to help guide and enable and empower humans to be more secure. Obviously, we want to collect that behavioral data. We want to analyze that over time. Want to make a quick call out that when you decide to test various approaches, you want to change one variable if possible, not multiple. So this is true of most scientific methods. You don't want to change a bunch of variables because you want to understand what actually impacted that behavior change or didn't. And then you can iterate from there. And then consider how many different communication methods, who are audiences, how do they best receive information? How are we presenting that information, et cetera? Okay, that was a lot. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff in another venue. This is all well and good, but this talk is about careers. So how do we get our leaders on board? So one of the things that we hear when managers tell us they don't know how to promote us is that they don't know how to make a case to leadership to promote us. So I'm going to actually start with some cold water, so to speak, and say you may have to work through skepticism over time. And there are some places where this will just not be possible. That being said, I do very much believe that we can help get our leaders on board with this approach. In fact, I actually take this as part of my responsibility, which is why I'm here with you all today. So to start, we need to speak their language, and that is business language. So we need to focus on the risk we are reducing and showcase how the corresponding behavior increases or decreases that risk. So for example, if our risk is credential theft, which leads to escalated access to systems and or information, then our behavior might be to use a password manager consistently. And then the highly specific sub-behaviors for that would be enroll in a password manager, use a password manager to create complex, unique passwords, store all passwords in a password manager, use password manager on a regular basis, right? Those are all distinctly unique behaviors. Remember that we want to measure outcomes, not activities. So we want to measure behavior. And here we want to think really in tangible percentages and show trends over time. And to do that effectively, we need to have that baseline when we start. So remember to get the baseline. We can also, frankly, share this new career ladder framework with them, briefly introduce them to the idea of behavior science. They will likely need help in understanding why this matters and why this is effective. we should showcase how we can be more effective and grow in the same way that our technical counterparts are expected to grow. So ideally, this would also help us, say, negotiate for a higher wage as it's our technical, right? This is part of why I like to use the term socio-technical to describe myself. In particular, we can advocate for making security simpler using this behavioral research as rationale, right? So for example, if infusing security into the process someone is already doing is relying on their system one thinking, we're far more likely to be successful, right? So let's say that we want to increase people submitting for security review. If we were to put that into a secure development lifecycle process that already, software development lifecycle process that already exists, it's already wrapped into the process they're already ready to do. So I do want to say this will likely take time in the same way that culture takes time, right? Or takes time to change. So one way to demonstrate success is to ask for opportunities to do this on a small scale to start. So choose one risk and the related behavior you want to try to work on using some of these approaches. Once you're able to showcase some success, you might be able to get more traction to adopt this at a larger scale. And then finally, an easy way that we can shift some leadership mentality is to more simply break down our responsibilities for them. Like, what would this even look like in reality? So they recognize the traditional inputs, training, engagement, communications, etc. But there are a few areas that would enhance our ability. So we should be partnering with technical teams to implement security solutions from that bridging perspective. We should be driving change within our systems and processes to make security simpler, to bring security to people rather than make them come to us. And finally, we should really take the time to discover and understand the security behaviors we see, mitigate the inherent risks there, and be able to analyze, garner, report that data effectively. I know these responsibilities may be newer to us, right? There can be some fear there, some anxiety. I don't know how to do any of this. That's totally fine. Learning them will only help us level up in our awareness careers. And if you think about it, getting leadership buy-in on this is actually behavioral influence at its finest. So kind of what we do.